Hey everybody, I'm Eugene Driscoll. Welcome to Valley Navel Gazing / Valley Sports Rewind. I'm here with Valley Indy reporter Ethan Fry.
Good morning.
And then Mike Canicci, the host of Valley Sports Rewind. How are you, Mike?
Good, Gene. Thank you for having me on today. Appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. It's kind of your show. What we're here to talk about today is The Game. It's a new documentary about one of the greatest high school football rivalries in Connecticut history. It's Ansonia versus Derby. The Game, and Mike and Sean Morse, who's also here today, are two of the filmmakers. The Game will premiere on Comcast 10 Tuesday, November 1st at 8 p.m. The Game airs again on Comcast Cable 10 Wednesday, November 2nd at 10 p.m. Finally, a special documentary screening will be held at the Derby Public Library Wednesday, November 2nd at 6:15 p.m., followed up by a Q&A with the aforementioned filmmakers, Sean Morse and Mike Canicci. So, guys, it's really a pleasure to have you both on today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I feel like I don't have any qualifications whatsoever to ask you about the Game or the Ansonia-Derby rivalry because you guys are the experts. I'm not from here. I didn't grow up here, although I do attend. I live on Hawthorne Avenue, so I think that gives me some type of...
You're in the valley. That's all that matters.
When there's when Derby football plays Ansonia, the cars do park in front of my house. So,
that's right.
And I bring my son. Even though maybe the rivalry wasn't what it was a long time ago.
Right.
It still definitely means something to people, as evidenced by the people who do attend. But I guess we should just start off with and take the conversation wherever you guys want. But exactly what is this documentary?
Okay, so basically, Sean and myself, we've been doing like little projects in the past 2 years. We've done stuff with the executive producer at Comcast, who used to do all the Valley cable games that were on Channel 10 years ago. And that went on for like 25 years where they aired Valley cable games. You know, the games would be played on Friday nights, Saturday mornings, and they would air them Sunday night at 7 o'clock. And they would also replay them throughout the week. So we started doing a lot of conversions of those games to DVD. So we were converting one day, and I don't know how it got started. I don't know if Sean brought it up or if I did, but we just talked, and we were like, you know, this Derby-Ansonia rivalry hasn't quite been the same, not as we knew it growing up. You know, maybe we should really like kind of give people an idea who didn't grow up around here what this rivalry means to not only, you know, the Valley and stuff like that, but high school sports in general.
So the idea is to preserve. I mean, you started converting all those games to preserve the history, I would assume.
Exactly, yeah.
And so, Sean, take it. Where to go from there? You had this germ of an idea.
Yeah, so I think, you know, Mike and I have had a ton of ideas over the past year or so since we started doing a lot of this stuff. And, you know, I think we really want to make it an Ansonia Derby week, you know. Maybe, you know, it's not the rivalry that it was 10 or 20, 30 years ago, but, you know, the film is to add a little more of that aurora to the rivalry that it used to be, you know, and I think our hope is that, you know, we want it to sort of maybe bring a couple more people to the game. Maybe it won't bring, you know, the thousands that it did back in the day, but maybe it'll bring one or two. So it sort of developed into you know, something where we got former players together and we talked. We had all these different ideas flowing, you know, and we have tons more ideas too. But
so how did it? You see, the documentary is actually you've got archival footage, I guess, that played on Comcast,
right? And also just old Ansonia Derby films of games that weren't on Comcast, but they were, you know, taped by whoever they had taping the games, so the coaches could, you know, go over film and stuff like that. There's games on the classic page that are from like 1967.
What's the classic page?
Basically, we started an Ansonia Derby classic page, and we show old Derby and Ansonia football games, and we put it up there. I think we started that in 2015. maybe late 2014
On YouTube.
on YouTube, yeah, and it just shows different types of games. And I could tell you right now, that's the thing that's why I know that there still can be a good rivalry, because we got so many requests. Do you have this game? Do you have that game? You know, people still care. It's just that, I don't know, for whatever reason, the time's just different. But the old Derby Ansonia people that grew up with that rivalry, they still care about it.
So who are some of the people you conduct interviews with in the documentary?
In the documentary, so we had Sean Rowley, we had Ben Bartone from Derby, great quarterback. We had Ellis Ings, very well-known back in Ansonia and well-known figure around the valley as well. Chris King, who's some
Rob
Derby?
Hyder. We also had Mike Jadek, Joe Ferrigno. We had Bob Barth. He's the PA announcer for the Ansonia games, and he grew up, you know, in the 50s when the rivalry really started to take off. We had him.
James Lane.
James Lane. We also had Sean Rowley. I'm sure Mark Saros, we had him as well. So, I mean, we had a lot of Derby Ansonia people. Ronnie Leno, who was a longtime Derby coach as well as a player. So we definitely, you know.
Greg Soldier.
Kente Douglas, Shane Edmonds.
Was there any particular story that you were surprised by or that you didn't know about? That was,
You know, I'll tell you one, and I don't want.
or do you have to edit out everything? Is this all on the editing room floor
I'll tell you-
somewhere?
I'll give a little teaser.
I'll tell you a little teaser, and it was by Mark Saros, and, you know, he's just a riot. He basically said that he followed Ansonia everywhere they went. He
And who
said,
do you, is for an ignoramus like me, who is this gentleman?
"Oh,
Who do you
Mark
play
Saros.
for?
Mark Saros. I'm sorry about that. Mark Saros was a player for Derby from 82 to 85, and he was the quarterback on the 85 Derby team, and his team ended the streak. Ansonia had won 11 games in a row against Derby. His Derby team ended the streak with a 7-6 win. You know, Mark's a great guy. He's just a character, but basically, in one of the interviews we did with him, he said he followed Ansonia everywhere, and one of the things he said was, if they ate at Dutch's, I ate at Dutch's. So, you know, it's things like that. Like, back then, that's how intense the rivalry
He was a bit obsessive.
Yeah. And Ansonia kids went to Dutch's a lot, so I'm sure, you know, Mark spent quite a bit of money, you know, leading up to that game. But that's basically what the rivalry was like. And I'll tell you right now, Gene, you know, back then, if you were seen talking to an Ansonia person, if you were from Derby, and the same thing if you were an Ansonia person talking to a Derby person, you took a lot of heat. Like, when I went to high school,
And you went to Derby,
I went to Derby, Sean went to Ansonia.
and you guys are related.
Right.
You guys
I'll
are
give you a
cousins,
good
right?
example.
Graduated the same year.
I'll give you a good example. I talked to Sean one time at a Derby football game because we were freshmen, so we weren't on the varsity. And I took a lot of flack because he was from Ansonia. And I said, well, you know, guys, he's my cousin. Oh, that's ridiculous. You're giving him plays and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, my God, I'm just, you know, hanging out with him. But that's how intense it is.
And how long is this documentary? How
It's an hour, so 58 minutes, and I think most people will like it. I think it's something that, especially the old timers, you guys are really going to really enjoy it.
And then how much footage did you go through? Like how difficult? I mean, imagine this had to get it down to an hour must have taken
Well, we
a great
started it in early August, and we just finished it, a few days ago?
I finished it last week.
Wow,
Well,
okay.
Wednesday I finished it. Yeah, Wednesday, November or October 25th.
And
So like this is something you would do? Was it an all day thing, or did you stay?
well,
up
you
all
know, we
night,
were
or-
getting more people to interview. Like, I'll give you a good example. We got Joe Ferrigno probably like 3 weeks ago, maybe a month ago, but it was definitely sometime in late September. And we got James Lane as well and Sean Rowley. So we're still trying to round up people because, you know, at the same time, people have stuff to do. They couldn't always be available, but we wanted to make sure that we made it as good as we possibly could. And, you know, we were patient enough to know that we had till November to finish it. So let's keep trying to make it better and better, you know, because you can never do enough. You want to make it as good as it possibly can be.
And how did you? And this might be like just technically, like, what did you edit it on? Like, what's the workload like there?
Yeah, it's heavy. I spent many a nights till 3, 4 o'clock in the morning editing. That's kind of what I do in general. But yeah, I mean, the editing was as intense as the rivalry itself.
Explain that. Yeah.
So.
Oh, and are you favoring Ansonia in this as an Ansonia resident, or does your bias come out?
No. I just I'm an intense videographer as it is, but I noticed like little things that with the rivalry sort of between me and Mike that would come out within the documentary, like as far as intensity is concerned. That was something that was drilled into me as an Ansonia player. Intensity.
Right. Yeah.
So like Mike would be like, well, I want to interview Joe Frigno in front of the press box now. Let's change it up a bit, make it a little different. And I'd be like, okay, well, now we're going to interview James Lane and Sean Raleigh in front of the Boots Jarvis thing.
Yeah.
So, little things came out between me and Mike, rivalry-wise, for the Ansonia-Derby Rise as filmmakers, as part of the process of filmmaking.
Yeah, that the thing we should point out, like if you watch a lot of documentaries, it's usually like a guy in a room in some location that could be anywhere. But you guys made it a point to sort of tie the community locations into it. I saw you guys like at the Riverwalk. I was taking my son home from soccer once, and I'm like, hey, that's Mike Canicci.
Yeah, I remember seeing you, and you're waving to me. Yeah, we were interviewing the coaches, Coach Brockett for Ansonia and Coach French for Derby. The thing is, Gene, is that we both appreciate the rivalry, and I probably hated Ansonia a lot when I was younger. A lot of that has to do with my uncle, because my uncle would just drive me nuts. My uncle Ed Morse, great guy, but he is
your dad, or
it's my uncle too. It's my dad's brother.
Gotcha.
And his mom's
my mother's brother.
Okay, gotcha.
He is, the toughest person to take when Ansonia wins. So I would always want to beat Ansonia to shut him up, and we kind of did some friendly bets. I remember one year we started it, I think it was 1988, and Derby won. Well, he had to wear a Derby shirt and a Derby hat, and he had to walk into the living room and go Derby. Well, it was great. That whole year I was feeling great, and I was letting him have it. Well, fast forward, the following year, Ansonia won. Well, guess what? They set me up that night. I was only supposed to wear an Ansonia shirt. They went all out. They gave me an Ansonia flag, a hat, a Derby shirt, and I had to basically sit there and hold the flag up, and it said Ansonia #1, whatever it said.
Is any of this in the documentary? Did any of that personal stuff make it in? Like
we tried to find pics. I don't know where they are, but
that
would have been fun to do. But, and then myself and Sean, we used to, I remember one week, Sean was just talking so much trash to me. I was talking about Notre Dame was playing Miami that week, and I was saying, he's like, what's the matter? You look mad. And I'm like, I was talking to Tone, my father. He said he doesn't think my Notre Dame's going to beat Miami. I said, and he's got me feeling, awful because I hate Miami. And then he goes like this. He goes, well, Tone's going to feel even worse after Ansonia kills Derby that week. And so he said that to me, and fortunately enough, Derby won, and he didn't call me. Now, he called me the night Ansonia won. I said, okay, hold on. You called me that night, and we're talking all that junk. You talked all that junk that week. So I made sure I gave him a call later that night. If he wasn't going to call, I was going to call.
Was it hard to get people? Did anybody say, I don't want to participate, or did you have to kind of work to get anybody, or everybody was really...
I'll tell you right now, everybody I asked, I'll be there. That's what they said. Everybody. And it wasn't... We had one guy, I'm not going to mention his name. We had one guy who didn't think he gave us enough. He said, could I come back and do another one? I want to give you guys some more. So right there, that guy came back twice in 1 week, and I thought that, was awesome.
And I sit in here, Mike, every week when you do the Valley Sports Rewind podcast, and I'm completely, like I said, I'm completely ignorant of the history, the names. And it's always fascinating to me when you'll have a guest who you'll ask a question, and maybe they don't remember. Because, we're going back 30 years.
Right.
But then to see them, all of a sudden you can see something gets unlocked.
Yeah.
And they start, like when you're doing an interview, is there anything that you try to draw people out to get them to trigger things, or somebody who's uncomfortable? How do you sort of make them?
The thing of it is one of the things when you're doing an interview is, in my opinion, you want that guest to feel comfortable. Because if they're not feeling comfortable doing it, then you're doing two things. One, you're making them feel uncomfortable, and two, you're not doing a good job. And I try to make sure that I'm not going to be that type of guy to ask them, a tough question like, oh, well, you fumbled that ball. That was terrible. Or, you missed the foul shot at the end of the game. That's not what the idea is about. The idea is just to kind of reminisce with them about their career. And the thing of it is it's so much fun for me because I grew up with a lot of these guys, interviewing guys like, Coach Sponheimer and Coach Lisi. Now, I grew up in Derby, and getting to ask them questions that I could never ask them because I grew up in Derby and never got to see. It's just so much fun for me because it's questions I always wanted to ask when I was a kid or when I was growing up that I couldn't do. And I get to do that with everybody that comes in here. And that's what makes it the most, rewarding.
And what were your roles in the documentary? Like, who did what?
Well, basically, like I'll tell you right now, I'm just like a spare part. He gets most of the credit because he did all the filming. He did most of the editing. Basically, I asked the questions. And, I went and got Derby guys. I contacted all the Derby guys. He got all the Ansonia guys. But basically, I just asked questions, and I kind of narrated the thing. But that was it.
But I think, you also, did a lot of the creative and helped with sort of the directional creativity as far as saying, maybe you should edit that like this and stuff like that. So you did a lot of that. Sure, I did a lot of the the editing and the filming and sort of the technical stuff, and I make a lot of films, so I'm used to that. But yeah, it was a team effort, I think, when you look at it in the whole perspective of it all.
And was there any, Sean, like particular feel you were going for? I think like of the 30-30 documentaries are now sort of the thing in sports documentaries. Is it similar was that like a vibe you were going for, anything that inspired you that you wanted to recreate?
Yeah, we do want to kind of make it's not quite as nice as an ESPN documentary.
Right.
We're independent filmmakers doing this stuff. We're not anything of the caliber of an ESPN. We do have Cable 10 behind us, and that helps tremendously in a lot of ways, but it's a labor of love to a certain extent. You were asking about...
just if there was you watch documentaries and then there is like that 30 by 30 feel where it's real sort of journalistic, and then there's other documentaries where the documentary maker makes himself or herself part of the story. It's not so much about us. It's about the players that we interviewed, and it's about the coaches that we interviewed. Charlie DeCenzo, Bill McAllister. We don't want to give away the whole thing, but it's about the rivalry itself. This is not about us. I want to make that clear. This is about the rivalry, and the story of it goes. There's games in this that go back to the '60s in this documentary. Players talking about their experience with the rivalry. And what it mean, what they want to say to the kids in this year's game too. We want to make this about a Derby Ansonia week. We want this to be like Alabama versus Auburn, in a week where players and coaches come back, and it's a whole week of an event. And we've got different ideas for future years,
right?
But it's all. This is sort of like a first step, hopefully, and maybe we could get some people to come back.
And then did you want to say something, Mike?
Just to give you an idea, though, how intense the rivalry was, I'll give you 1985 just as a good example. When Derby beat Ansonia that year, Derby fans left the parking lot, and they would take their cars to Ansonia, and they would start beeping at people, waving stuff. And Ansonia people would do the same thing to Derby people. If Derby got beat, I'll never forget. One time Ansonia beat Derby, and it was a close game. It was a heartbreaker. And we're getting out of the car to go inside, and there's just a bunch of Ansonia cars beeping the horn going, Ansonia's number one. That's how intense it was, because you didn't have all this social media, and you didn't have everything you have today. That's what a lot of people in those towns, that was their life, was that game.
I think a couple years ago, a rude sign got hung off a Route 8 overpass in one of the towns. Somebody
that's mentioned in the documentary.
Okay, somebody, we were alerted to that on social media. But one thing I wanted to ask.
Let me just turn on your mic. You're blowing it out. Sorry, Ethan.
Sorry. One thing I wanted to ask you, Mike. like Derby plays Shelton on Thanksgiving. Right?
Yes.
And like that's sort of another rivalry, I guess.
Right.
Like is it as a Derby person, would you still rather, if you had to choose whether to beat Ansonia or Derby, would it be Ansonia?
I'm going
hands
to tell
down?
you this right now. When I was younger, if we beat Ansonia and we lost to Shelton, I didn't care. But now, I'd probably say that it might mean more to beat Shelton. And I know you probably think I'm crazy to say that. But, I mean, Shelton is a school with 2,000 kids in it, where Derby's a school with probably 400. And they have been, like, giving Derby their lumps the last probably decade. So to kind of go out there and pull off an upset against them, I think it means more to me as a Derby person than. And I'm not saying if Derby were to beat Ansonia next week, that'd be a great feeling. But I feel like beating Shelton, for whatever reason, it means more now to me. I don't know why. Because I don't hate Ansonia, like I used to. I don't really hate them like I once did,
You went away to rehab for it.
It's sort of like in another podcast you described the Ansonia as like the Yankees.
He did
and
so
it's
just at this, the one we just recorded before.
Yeah,
Right.
Red Sox fans, it's like now that they've won 3 World Series in recent years, it's like
that
let's have
rivalry
my
is not
family.
the same
Yeah,
anymore.
yeah.
That rivalry was a rivalry because the Yankees were always winning and the Red Sox were trying to beat them. Now it's watered down now. It's not the same.
And let me ask you guys, and whoever wants to answer first can. But if there was one person from Derby Ansonia football that you maybe living or that you didn't get or that has passed on, who would you want to interview?
I mean, that's very easy for me. It would be Lou DiFilippo, because Lou DiFilippo was, an iconic person in Derby, and just to be able to interview him would be something special. Now, if you're talking about from Ansonia, it would definitely be Boots Jarvis, because
Did you just steal Sean's answer?
I probably did.
Kind of, yeah.
The reason the reason I say those two, though, because Lou got Derby to be like Ron Carbone started the winning tradition there, but Lou DiFilippo took it to a whole nother level. I mean, people were packing that house every Saturday morning to watch that team play. This guy was an iconic figure. And Boots Jarvis, he coached 4 sports at Ansonia. He coached football, basketball, baseball, and track. And he built those programs and made them all winners. And, just the fact that, like, he has his own field named after him, I would love to just sit down and talk about the 40s and 50s, because I don't know those eras that good. And I just think that would be an interview where I'd make him stay 8 hours. I really would.
And Sean, what about you?
Yeah, I was going to say Boots Jarvis. I think he's the obvious answer. But I also think, we wanted to interview a lot of people for this, but you have to interview who's available and who we can track down. That's the other thing. Yeah. But I would say probably Sandy Oshesky, from quarterback for Ansonia in the 70s. He was there for that streak, the 36-0. Yeah, 36-0.
Wow.
And he was just phenomenal. I think he played college ball, right?
I believe so. I can't
He
remember.
might have even played semi-pro. I'm not sure, but
right.
But he was just phenomenal. And when you talk about the 70s or just the history of Ansonia football in general, he was one of the quarterbacks that brought it to a whole new level. Pre-80s.
Excuse me. Has he passed, or you couldn't track him down?
No, Sandy's still around. In fact, his kids both played for Seymour.
Okay.
Not too long ago. I think his youngest son was there as of 2010, 2011. So he's been around. He's coached in different AAU leagues, I'm pretty sure. I remember he reffed. I know that. He would ref a lot down at the Boys and Girls Club. And, another guy, Gene, that I'd love to interview, and he's still living. I would love to interview Glenn Antrim from Ansonia. Glenn was, some say, the best receiver that the state ever had. He was that good, and he would go on to play at UConn, and then he even played 2 years in the NFL with the Patriots.
Somebody else we've been trying to track down, too, for different things is Kevin Sharkey.
Yeah, and I mean,
if you're out there.
Yeah, Kevin Sharkey. If you're out there, we're trying to get a hold of you. But Kevin was a guy I could not stand when he played for Ansonia. I wanted to beat Ansonia, too, for him, because he was that good of a player, great running back, great defensive back. And then I got to know him afterwards, and talking to him, several times. I love the guy. He's the nicest guy in the world. But what a career. I definitely have been trying to track him down for 2 years now.
Yeah, and let me just you bring up an interesting point. Maybe it's a stupid question, but to be in that rivalry like you guys were. How old are you, Mike?
40, unfortunately.
I'm 42, so it's right. What about you, Sean?
I'll be 40 in December.
Okay, so we're all about the same age. So you're in that heated rivalry for Derby, one on the Derby side, one on the Ansonia. How do you let it go after you graduate? Like if you see, because you're sort of, Ansonia is such a rival to you. At what point? Because I remember when I was in high school, we didn't have that football tradition, but they were people you didn't talk to in high school, and this guy, you hated this guy, and then you'd go away to college, and then when everyone turned 21, everyone would show up at a bar, and it was like everybody was friends.
Yeah.
And it had changed some of that. How does that happen with the Derby and Ansonia?
I think it's what you said. You go to a bar, you see different people. I mean, honestly, Gene, when I was in high school, you just hated Ansonia because they were Ansonia. But I can't tell you that I necessarily hated some of the kids because, growing up with Sean, I knew some of those kids, and I really liked them. I really liked Billy and Dave Sisto. They went to Ansonia. They were good guys, There's a couple I'm probably missing. I like Tom Pepe. I thought he was a great kid. He played for Ansonia as well. Sean Phipps. I didn't have any animosity towards them. And I went to religion with some of those kids, so I kind of knew them. And
where was that?
Assumption Church.
Okay.
And I'll tell you right now, that I brought up Tom Pepe and Sean Phipps. They knew I played for Derby. They never once ever said anything negative to me. They would just ask me how the team was doing. And they were great guys. So, I didn't hate them. It was just there were some players on Ansonia I don't think I particularly liked. But
no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, but I liked kids
Tune into
like
the documentary
so
to find out.
It wasn't. I didn't have probably the same hatred I did. And when I got out of high school, after just being on the team, I wasn't a good player by any means, but I just was happy to be done at that point. The love for it for a while had disappeared because when you're going to practice every day and stuff like that, and it's just a drain, I was just kind of relieved it was over at that point.
And, one thing, I was at a meeting this week where Derby has money from the state to redo their fields, essentially.
Right.
And they're going to get a new football field and a new track,
right?
Which is sorely needed, badly needed if you go up there and look at the facility. But the baseball field has to find a new place to go. And it was really nice to see all the parents and the players and the Derby baseball coach, actually. They all it could have been one, soccer versus baseball, and they all came together.
Right.
And they sort of challenge this committee to find an answer that works for everyone. Because I think sometimes, from an outsider's perspective, Derby and Ansonia get hit with the stereotype that athletics matter more than anything. It's taken too seriously. But now that I'm a father myself of a 5-year-old, I'm not rolling in money doing this for a living. And one of the, I can pay $20 and sign my kid up for soccer. And there's a social aspect of it that's so important.
Right.
And do you guys think that stereotype, that's lost? Because for me, sports is important. My kid's not going to grow up to be Derek Jeter, or you know what I mean? He's inherited my genes.
Right.
But it's a way for him to socialize. It's a way for him to hang around with other kids, and that's what I find. And I think that the parents in that room, they were all coming from the same place.
Right.
So anyway, I don't know if you guys...
Gene, one of the worst things I think any person could do is encourage one sport to dislike the other sport when they're both in the same town. And, if you're a football team, you shouldn't have any issues with the soccer team or the cross-country team. Same thing if you're a basketball team, you shouldn't have any issues with, say, hockey team or wrestling team. And baseball and track should never have any issues because at the same time, it's your town, it's your school. You should kind of come together and support each other. There shouldn't be, I don't want to see baseball get this, or football should only get this, but not cross country. It should never be like that. And if you're the type of person that doesn't want to see the other sports do good, I think you shouldn't be in it,
What if you guys thought back, what if football wasn't there when you were younger? You ever think that alternative universe?
Can't picture that.
I mean, I will tell you this, that growing up as a kid, my favorite sport was basketball. it wasn't football. I like going to the games and stuff, but I really enjoyed basketball the most because, I was decent at it, and I didn't think of myself as a football player. So I don't know. I think if I had basketball, granted, Derby's never had a good basketball program, but I think just having basketball, it would be great. But I could tell you right now, I think for a lot of people in this town, I don't know if those other sports back then would mean much to them like football has, because football was something they did with their wives on Saturdays. They went to games,
and it was
stuff
amazing,
like that.
amazing to hear Bob Lisi and Mr. Sponheimer talk about how the rivalry was really fostered outside of the field and the
Yes.
factories here,
Yeah.
and that's been a big change in the Valley. And how about in terms of, so this is going to air the game. It's going to be on Comcast 10 Tuesday, November 1st at 8 p.m. It'll replay Wednesday, November 2nd at 10 p.m. on Comcast Cable. And then you're screening it at the Derby Public Library,
Right.
November 2nd, 6:15 p.m. So what's going to happen there? How are you guys working to get the word out about this, Sean?
Yeah, this is a great question. I went yesterday. I went all up and down Main Street, Ansonia, and downtown Derby, and I pretty much flyered the whole place. I went to the Doyle Senior Center, and I walk into the Doyle Senior Center, and Mary Deptula, who I've known since I was a kid, works there, and the seniors are all going, "Who are you? Do you coach? What's going on here? Who are you affiliated with?" And I'm like, "No, I'm just here to put up a flyer, And then, I went into some of the local businesses like Sardo's and, Massimino's and Copper City Grill. And I was absolutely amazed. This rivalry may not be what it was. There may only be a couple hundred people at this game. But when I went into these businesses and I said, "Hey, look, I'm a director with Comcast Public Access. And, we got this Ansonia-Derby documentary coming up." As soon as I say I'm with Public Access, Comcast, they look at you kind of funny. They think you're trying to sell them advertising or something.
Okay, yeah.
But as soon as you mention, Ansonia-Derby, they're like, "Oh, yeah, sure, no problem. I'll put it up in the window right now." And so this rivalry is still in the hearts and minds of these. Maybe these people won't be at the game, and maybe Main Street won't shut down like it used to in the 80s and the 90s or 70s or whatever. But this rivalry is still in the hearts and minds of these people at these businesses and around town and stuff. And it's still in their hearts, and it still lives. Maybe not at the game itself, but if Derby was to come back at one of these years and make it a close game, or a couple years and have a close game, and maybe Derby win one, you'd see a whole lot more people at the game. And that's one of the things that's mentioned in the documentary. I'm not going to say by who, but one of the people that is in the documentary, they talk about how the 2010 game, Derby was up 13 points at halftime.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, every season on Facebook, hundreds of people started flocking to the game.
Yeah,
I was actually
crazy.
at that when we
Yeah.
when we first launched valleyindy.org. I would go up with my cell phone as a hotspot, and we would use Cover It Live to relay the game. And I remember that game. It was pretty amazing. It looked like Derby might pull it off, and our traffic actually, because you could see how many people, because we were putting it on Facebook,
Sure.
and you could see it spike. So
Gene, that's another thing you talked about when you guys launched this. That's another reason too. I think that rivalry isn't the same anymore, is because that Evening Sentinel is not available anymore. Mm-hmm. That made it so much better because they would capture so many images from that game. There would be different write-ups, and people lived for, getting their Evening Sentinel to, look at that stuff. And I think that has to do a lot with why the rivalry died down too. Some people may say, well, I don't think that's really the problem, but I definitely think it plays a part.
The Dana Tinty cartoons,
yeah,
which are these
all
old
stuff
cartoons
like that.
in the
And
80s.
they would prep it all week. They would be having different predictions. They would have different memories of the games, and I think that was something that was great for the Valley. And when that kind of died, that was that rivalry died a little bit with it.
That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to build it up a little bit more, even if it's not what it was. Maybe we could get an inkling of what it was, just a little inch,
And just shining a light on it and showing that it's still happening, that somebody's paying attention is important.
And it's still there in their hearts, Like I said, they might not be at the game, or they might not think about it as like they used to Main Street might not shut down, but it's still in their hearts and minds and in the spirit of the Valley, I think.
People are still at Dutch's every day talking about it. You have the old timers, and they are there every day, and that's all they talk about. They don't talk about anything else. They talk about Derby and Ansonia football all the time.
Well, if you could put a plug for valleyindy.org in the news once in a while, just slip that in. Be like, hey, there's a budget public hearing. But no, that's neither here nor there. Well, is there anything you guys wanted to add before we wrap it up that I haven't asked you? Or
Go ahead if you want. Go ahead.
I just wanted to let people know, this is a great documentary. We tried to get as many people as we could. It was a short time frame. We were working with 2 months. If you weren't asked to be in it, it's just we could only do an hour. Comcast will only give us an hour. That doesn't mean you can't reach out to us for other things. Mike's podcast or Hometown Heroes. But again, we hope people will come to the screening and watch it on Cable 10. We'll be on YouTube eventually, but we'll let you know. Visit us at Ansonia-Derby Classic Football on Facebook or YouTube if you have any questions.
And I should add, Hometown Heroes is a talk show that you, Mike, or you guys both produce, I guess. On Comcast.
We started that in May of 2015. Basically, it's just... People sometimes, I think it's just a sports show, but it's just we interview people who have impacted their towns in some way. Recently I had an educator on from Orange, Connecticut, and she did a great job. And we just have different people who over the years have kind of impacted their town. And a lot of it is sports people because, for the Valley especially, a lot of the people that impacted their towns were sports people. But it's basically... for anybody, and it's been a great show so far. I mean, again, you talk about this documentary. Every guest that I've asked to come on has never said no to me, and that just goes to show that people do care. They just need, stuff has to be promoted, and you just got to reach out to them.
All right. Did we want to share the This Week in History? Is there anything interesting in there?
I found one from way back in 1934, and then this is interesting. These are from derbyhistorical.org, which is sort of collated them all from old Evening Sentinel clips. So this has a flavor of that rivalry, I think. This is 1934. Ansonia defeats Derby 12-0 at Island Park, which is now known as O'Sullivan's Island. So imagine... a football game down there in 0-degree weather and a cold wind. 4,000 brave the cold to watch, with hot coffee being a popular drink. The ice in the water buckets freezes before the game is over. Last week, Ansonia youths painted the goalpost lavender. Ansonia's football team was named Lavender back then.
Yeah.
So Derby responds a couple days later by painting their own goalpost bright red. Both of these goalposts are carried to Ansonia by their victorious fans after the game. So that's sort of a flavor of that, the sitting in their cars sort of honking. It's like they took the goalpost back to the town like a scalp, basically. Wow. So, but that's just like one thing I found quickly. If you go to derbyhistorical.org and click on This Week in History, there's a lot of good high school football anecdotes in there, to be sure.
Very cool.
Wow, that's awesome.
Nice.
Well, again, just one last plug. I'm definitely going to watch this thing when it airs. It premieres on 8 p.m. Tuesday, November 1st, Comcast 10. It'll replay Wednesday, November 2nd at 10 p.m. And then if you want to come out, ask these guys questions, and please do, show them some support. They'll be screening the documentary at the Derby Public Library Wednesday, November 2nd at 6:15 p.m., followed by Q&A. So Sean Morse and Mike Canicci, thank you so much for appearing.
Thank you. And just so you know, this will be more exciting than the election will.
What? Hey, come on now, Mike. What? You know what we should do? We should end by talking about Donald Trump, and not just kidding.
God, no.